Hello guys, and welcome to our third part of our Python programming tutorial. So last part we just saw about creating strings and various string operations that are available along with the looping statements as well as conditional statements we saw. So in this session what we'll be doing is we'll be learning more about some special data structures or data types which are present in Python programming language. They are lists, tuples and dictionaries. So we'll see what are lists, what are tuples and what are dictionaries, and how each one of them will play a huge role in developing some different kinds of softwares or different kinds of programming using these data structures. So let us begin with the first concept. The first concept that we will be dealing today is called as list. So what is a list, or how can we define lists in Python programming language is pretty simple. So list is nothing but a data type in Python programming language which is defined by square bracket. So list starts with a square bracket and ends with a square bracket. So you may have heard of arrays in case of C or C++ or Java programming language, but list is not similar to array because list can store any kind of data. So I can store numbers 1, 2, 3, or I can store strings, that is A, B, C, or I can store a floating value 12.457. Then I can store a Boolean value that is true or false. So any kind of data that you want can be stored inside a list. So list is an explicit data structure in Python or data type in Python which allows you to store different kinds of data in followed by a square bracket that is opens with a square bracket and closes with a bracket. So this is the speciality of list. So list can store any amount of data, whether it is a data that is taking in with numbers, or it can take data with the help of like strings or the floating point data, or as well as a true or false, which is your Boolean type of data. So these are all the different data types. Any kind of data type which Python allows, you can store all those data inside a list. So if you want to print a list, it is pretty simple. You can print the list, that is nothing but print list1. So you can print the list. So this is how you can print the list. So print of list1 will try to print the list. But after printing the list, one thing you need to consider is one beautiful thing about Python is you can put a list inside a list. For example, I have my list inside a list, so that is nothing but I will have a list of numbers within a list. So this is what can be done. So if I want to access the elements of the list, so list can hold any data type in Python. So any like available data type in Python, a list can store. So a list can store even a list also. So how to access the elements of the list is using indices. So you have seen the examples of your string, how to access each and every element of the string, that is using index. So it will start from 0 and end at length of string -1. So to start with, that is nothing but to print the 0th element, it is nothing but print list1 of 0, which is nothing but the first element of the list. So after printing that first element, you can see the first element being printed. But the thing is, you can print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0 is the 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if I want to print the fourth element of my list, that is, I can print using the index given, that is 4, that is already a list. So similar to your that is your string. So you can print even range of elements. So you can print from 1 to 3. What is the range of elements that is available in the list? So you can print that thing. So you can see that this like the index number 0, it is printing from 1 to 3. So 1 to 3 index is being printed. So if you don't mention the first index, it will consider it from 0, similar to the string. So if you don't mention the last index, so it will consider it as the last length, that is nothing but the last element of the total list. So that is how it is printing. And the next thing is to calculate the length of the list. It is pretty simple. You can use the keyword called as len. So len will give you the length of that particular list. So length of a particular list is given by the function that is len. So that will give you the length of that particular list. So the length of that particular list is 5. The total length of the list is 5. Okay, next comes the question that is, so if I have a list inside a list, so how can I access the element? So the thing is, you have your 1, 2, 3, that is an integer, ABC, it is a string, 12.332 is a floating point, true is nothing but a boolean, but here it is a list. So if I want to access this 123, so how do I access this 123? It is nothing but list 1 of 4 is giving me this particular list. So 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4 is giving me this particular list. So it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4 is giving me this particular list. But to access the first element, that is this 123. So how do I access? I need to give the index of that particular list. That is nothing but 0 is telling me that is the index. So if I try to print that particular list, so it is giving me 123, it is telling me it is the particular list. So if I want to print the range of values, that is nothing but 0, 1 and 2. So what I'll do is I'll use a colon and I'll use 3. So why I'm using the 3? So because the thing is, whenever I use 3, the last element is not included. 0, 1 and 2 is included. So even mentioning the third index is not included, only till the second index. So this last index is not included. So that is very important to understand. So now what is the thing that we'll try to do is, so I have my list that is nothing but the list 1. So if I want to delete any of my elements, so for example, I want to delete my another list that I have entered. So what I will do is I'll use the keyword called as del. So delete list 1 of, you have 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So this fourth index, if I want to delete, I can use the keyword called as delete. So then I will print my list 1. So if I want to print my list 1, pretty simple. So it is removing my last that is data, that is nothing but my fourth index, that is nothing but another list. So this delete operation can be used for anything. So if you want to delete the whole list, it is nothing but del list 1, so it will delete the whole list. So then it won't print anything because there is no list list for it to be printed. So similarly, you can delete a string also. If you can initialize a string as st as string, so s is a string, so whose value is like any random value you can keep. So if you want to delete that particular string also, it is the same thing. So you can use delete for deleting the particular string. So you can delete strings, you can delete any data type that you want. So that is allowed in case of Python. You can delete any data. So why do you need to delete any data? It is very simple. So there will be many instances in the programming language where you will initialize some variables. But the major thing to consider is whenever you are initializing the variables, after their usage, still that memory will be allocated and it will be used. So the major thing is you need to remove those extra allocated memories so that you free up the computer memory for any other operation. So very important to delete the elements when they are used up. So that is one part. Okay. So the next thing we'll try to do is concatenation. So I have my list 1 and I have my list 2. So similar to your string concatenation, you have your list 2 which is storing your data, that is nothing but your data, for example 1, 2 and 3 and 4 is the next list it is storing. So if I want to concatenate the two lists, so I will create a list 3. So that will concatenate my two lists. So it is nothing but list 1 plus list 2. So list 1 plus list 2 will concatenate my two lists. So if I want to print the list 3, which is the concatenated value of list 1 plus list 2. So it is simple. So it will print all the elements that is of my list 1 and list 2. So plus operation, so how it was used in string to concatenate two lists. So even in the case of your Python, in the case of Python list, you can concatenate two lists with the help of this plus. Okay, if you want to repeat the same list many a times, it is the same, that is you can use this star operator. So I want to repeat the list of my elements thrice. So what I will do is I will try to print that list 3, which is a repeated form of my data, that is nothing but 3 times of my list 1. So that is there. So what is the next thing that we'll try to learn is, so suppose I have created my list 1. So this last fourth index, I don't want it to be a list. I want to replace it with something. So how do I replace my data? So it is very simple. I will access my index, that is list 1 of 4 is my, for example, it is my list. It is this list. So if I want to remove it or if I want to replace it, it is pretty simple. I will replace with any data I want. So I will replace it with a string now. I'll name that string as Python. So what will happen is this fourth index, that is nothing but a list, will be replaced by a string. So if I want to print out my list one, so that will print out the changes that I have made, because I have changed the fourth index to my string that is Python. It is not a list anymore because I have replaced this fourth index by a string. So that is what we are trying to do now. So this is how you can change the values of any particular list element. So you can just directly use the index and you can change the values of all the elements of that particular list. So that is how you can do it. So similarly, if, to access the elements, I have told you to reverse the list. It is pretty simple. So in strings also I taught you. So it is nothing but my colon and -1. So if I use colon and -1, what it is doing is it is selecting all my indices from starting to ending, but -1 is telling me to print it in the reverse order. So if I want to reverse my list, so it reversed my list by doing the operation of colon and -1. So then the thing is how to print my individual elements of list. So to print any multiple individual elements, what you can do is you can use a for loop. So the for loop allows me to basically do a lot of operations. For example, for I in list 1. So what is this for I in list 1? For each and every individual element in list 1. So if I want to print my elements, that is I. So what this I is holding, each and every element of list 1. So for I in list 1 is, for the first iteration it will be 1, 2, 3. For the second iteration it will be ABC. So similarly, all the elements of my list. So if I want to print out the individual elements of my list, or if I want to do some operations on each and every individual elements of my list, so what I will do is pretty simple. So I will use a for loop where I can access each and every element of my list. So what I'll do, I use my print, that is print statement, to print each and every element. Print ABC, A, that is nothing but your data, that is nothing but 1, 2, 3, ABC, 12.332 and true, and 1, 2, 3, that is the last list that I want to print. So this is how you can use the format, that is nothing but your for statements, to access the individual elements of the list. So this is one part. So then what I will do is, I have a string called as S, which is having data, that is nothing but my Python. So what if I want to convert each and every character as a single list element? So it is very simple. I have a string named Python, Python. So I want to convert each and every character, that is P as a separate list element, Y as a separate list element, T as a separate list element, H as a separate list element. What I can do now is I can convert my string into a list. For example, list 1 is my list, empty list. So what I will do is I'll use a command called as list of S. So what is this list of S doing? Converting each and every character of my string as a separate list element and storing it in the form of list. So if I want to print that particular list, so I can use print statement to print that particular list which contains each and every single character. So each and every character of my entire string is stored as separate list element. So very simple thing to do. So it is similar, guys, whenever you want to convert your string to a float. For example, you have your number but it is stored in string. You can use float. You can use that is nothing but int of that is converting into integer. So whatever data type that you want to convert, you can convert them back also. So that is also there. So if you want to convert it into a string, so you can use strf to convert them back to the string. So that is how it is happening. So basically, when you want to convert any data into a list format, for example, most probably string. So what you will do is you will use the keyword that is called as list. So if you want to convert string to list, each and every character of that string to a list, so you can use the list of function to convert that. So that was the example on how to convert your string to a list. Okay, basically what we'll be doing is we'll be using some basic inbuilt functions to see what are all the operations that we can do with the help of list. So first thing is pretty simple. We have our list, that is nothing but 1, 2, 3 and 4, okay, 5. So what I will do is I will try to calculate which is the maximum of my list element. So to calculate the maximum of my list element, it is pretty simple. I will use a function called as max. So this max function will allow me to calculate the maximum element that is present in my list. So one thing is, while calculating the maximum element, make sure that all the data are of same type. So if it is a number, let it be a number. So if it is a string, let it be a string. So 1, 2, 3 and 5, that is the maximum element was 5. That is how it was able to calculate the maximum. So minimum element, you can use the minimum function to find out which is the minimum element present in your list, that is 1. So the problem is, if I have a list which contains string as well as my number, so then it won't be able to calculate the maximum and minimum. Why? Because the data type is not same, so you can't compare these two quantities. So how can you find out whether this is more than this or this is less than this? So if you are given two numbers, it can compare, but if you are given two strings, it cannot compare. So what it will do is, in case of string, so how do you calculate which is minimum and which is maximum in case of string? So I have two things, that is nothing but I have a string that is biology, then I have maths. Okay, so these two are strings. So if I want to find out the maximum of these two for the list which contains biology and maths, so what I will do is I will try to find the max. So it is telling me it is maths. So why it is maths? It is pretty simple, guys. So whenever you have your list elements as strings, so whenever you have your list element as strings, what happens is, whether it is a single character or multiple character, if it is a single character like A, B and like Z, so what it will do is it will convert it into ASCII format. So what is ASCII? It is pretty simple. Whatever you enter from your keyboard is not directly understandable by the computer. So when you enter the keyboard sequences, so it will be converted into mathematical numbers which are then understood by the computer. So similarly, the ASCII value of A is pretty much nothing but 98. So you need to add some 27 characters to get to Z. So that is why it is comparing single ASCII characters. So if you have single characters like just B and M in your particular list, so it will consider that particular character and try to fetch its ASCII values and then fetch the result of which is the maximum in that particular list. So if you don't have that particular option, that is nothing but if you don't have a single character but you have a group of characters, what it will do is pretty simple. So it will consider the first letter. So in biology it will consider B, in maths it will consider M. So it will consider the first letter and try to give out the output. So it is pretty simple. So it is trying to consider the first letter and trying to compare its ASCII value with the second string which is having ASCII letter M. So comparing the ASCII letters of B and M, so ASCII values of B and M. So M ASCII value was found out to be the highest. So what it does is it gives out the maximum as maths. So that is why it has the maximum ASCII value. So that is how it is able to give the maximum and minimum values to a string also. So we have the next thing. For example, so okay, there are two methods. So we have a list called biology and maths. So if I want to append another element, so how to add elements to my new list? So 0 and 1. So if I can use my second index to tell that my 0th and first index is biology and maths. So I can add chemistry as my second index and I can store it. So this is one method where you can assign a value to a index which was not assigned before. So then it will be added as a part of your new list. So that is one method where you can add an element to your list by assigning an index. So if you want to print, so it is telling that assignment is out of range. So very important to understand that. So if you want to assign a new element to the list, you can't use this method directly. So the thing to understand here is, to assign any new value to my list, I can't use a new index. For example, my list is only defined for my index 0 and 1, but I can't use my index 2 because it is not being assigned at all. So this method is invalid in case if you are trying to append a new element to the list. But you can append new element to the list by using a keyword called as append. So if you use a keyword called as append, what you can try to do is you can try to append another element. So what you can try to append is, I want to try to append chemistry. So if I want to try to append chemistry, so I will try to append this value chemistry. So if I want to try to print my list value, so the chemistry will also be added. So very important, you can't use a new index and directly assign the values. What you need to do is you need to use this function called as append to append a new element. But the major thing to understand is whenever you use the append keyword, it will be appended at the last of my list. So it won't be appended in the middle or it won't be appended at the start. So it will be appended at the last of my list. So the index will be assigned to the last index which was assigned previously. So that is how this append is working. So you can add any number of elements that you want to see. If you want to add any number of elements, the thing is you can't add it directly here. So there is another function that is being involved. So that is called as extend. So the thing about extend is pretty simple. So this extend doesn't take a string or a data variable as an input. So it doesn't take. So in case of append, you can append even any kind of data that you want. So any list element, any data type, even you can append a list also. But this extend is for only list. So if I have a list of numbers, so if I want to add that list 2 to list 1, so it is nothing but list 1 plus list 2. So instead of add, so that is nothing but a plus symbol, we can use this extend keyword. So to extend many elements. So if I want to add 2 or more elements to my list, I can't use my append. Append is for only one element. So if you want to do multiple like appending or multiple data addition, so you need to use this extend function which will extend. It is nothing but it will choose or it will take in different values, that is nothing but 1, 2 and 3. So those are all the elements of the list. So it will take those different elements and try to add it to our whole that is nothing but our existing list. So if you want to add a new list to my old list, nothing but extending the data of my list. So that is possible with the help of extend option. So then we have another function that we can try to understand. So that function is called as count. So you have seen count in the string data, which is telling us how many times a particular data element is present. So it can be either any data type that you want, because list allows you to take in any kind of data. So I can use this list.count of 4, which will count how many times the number 4 has appeared in this list 1. So that is also possible. So it is telling, okay, one second, I just printed list 1. I'll just print this whole part. So list 1 of count of 4 is telling me how many number is available. That is nothing but how many number of times my letter 4 is repeated. So my number 4 is repeated for 6 times. So I can even compare it for a string also. So if I have maths that is repeated 2 times, so I can count how many times number of maths is there in this particular list. So to count that, it will use count like function. So it has counted that it is appearing for like 2 times. So maths has appeared 2 times on our entire list. We just saw the working of all the types of functions. So that was count function. So moving on, we have another function called as insert function. So what does this insert function do is, okay, we had a function called as append function. So you already know that this append function, what it does is it adds new elements to the list. So if I want to try list1.append, so I knew that it will insert a new element. But the major problem is it is inserting my element at the last. So I don't want the element to be inserted at the last. I want to insert it at any place that I want to. So that is nothing but my defined user space. My whole data element should be appended at that particular place. So if I want to insert if I want to insert anything, that is insert any data, not exactly at the last, but to any position I want to. For example, in the 5th position, I want to insert a data called as Python. So if I want to do that, I will use the function called as list1.insert. So list1.insert is what it is doing is it is doing pretty simple. It is nothing but inserting Python string at my 5th index. So that is what it is doing. So if I want to run this code, I'll just run this code, print this statement. Okay. So what I should do is list1.insert is a function. So I can't print out the function. So it doesn't print anything. So what I want to print is list1. So I need to print the list1. So yes, so what is happening? So my Python got added into which position? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5th index, my Python got added. So that is how you can insert anything anywhere. So if I want to insert my 6th index with some other data, what is happening is I can insert my data to my 6th index, but the thing is the other indices will be moved along. So this, if previously my 6th index is 4, or 6th index is 6, what is happening is this 6 is getting shifted to 7th index, and that 6th index is replaced with this particular data that I want to insert. So that is what is happening in case of list.insert function. So after insert function, so we have another thing. So we have removal. So there are two methods, guys. So one is list1. Okay, you have your that is nothing but you have your data, that is list1. So then you have your list1. So if you want to remove my second element, so I can use delete list1 of second index. So there are other functions to remove my data. So first one is nothing but list1.pop. So list1.pop is a function. So what it will pop is pretty simple. So if you want to pop any index, so if I want to remove my maths from my entire thing, so I will use 1, that is my index. So that is what is the list function, list.pop function is doing. So pop function is basically removing the data according to my index. So if I tell list.pop1, it will remove my element which will belong to my first index. So if I want to print the list, that is nothing but list1. So if I want to see what data is in my list1, so I will print it. So after printing it, so you can see that my first element, which was maths before, got removed by using list.pop. So this is one way method of removing an element, but there is another method of removing any different element. For example, we have list.remove. So what this list.remove does is, it doesn't remove the index. So if I want to remove my math subject everywhere, so what it does is, it removes maths. That is nothing but it removes my data, that is maths, that is present in this entire list. But since there are two maths being involved, we'll check what is the result that we'll get. So the thing is, only the first index or the index where it first gets the word called maths, it removed that. But the last index has remained, that is the last data, that is maths, has removed in the same place. So one thing to understand is, whenever you use remove, if there are multiple data there, it removes only the first occurrence of the data. So remove function uses the element. It doesn't use the index, but pop function uses the index. So that is the difference between your pop, then remove and delete. So what is the difference between your delete and your pop? See, pop function basically what it does is, it removes it out of the list, but still it is in the clipboard memory. But what delete does is, it removes it from the entire data memory itself. So that is the difference between your pop and your delete. Delete also uses your index, pop also uses your index. Pop removes it just out of the list, but still the data will be in the computer memory. But the delete function removes it out of the entire computer memory. So that is what is happening. Okay, so then we have another function. So that is nothing but reversing function. So if you want to reverse the elements of the list, so you can use list1.reverse. So what it does is, it reverses the entire list. So you can see what, okay, so it is also again a non-returning function. So you need to you need to create the function first, then you need to print the list1. So if you want to print the list1, so it will be reversed. So what should be the result? Maths 4444. So the list has been reversed completely. So that is what is being done with the help of list.reverse. But there is also one more function called as sort. So, but for sort, I told you similarly how we have max and minimum. This sorting function works only if it has strings or only if it has integer. So similar kind of data should be there. So if I have numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I want to sort it out, so I will sort it out, then I will print the list. So what it did was, it arranged it in an, since my list is only arranged in ascending order, it arranged it in the same way. So if I have another combination where I have jumbled digits, so if I have a jumbled digit combination, so we'll see what happens. So we'll just try to print out. Yeah, so basically it arranged everything in according to the ascending order. So You have your smallest letter arranged first, then the largest letter. So it arranged according to your ascending order. Suppose I have a list of strings. So I told you I have like list of strings, that is nothing but maths. Then I have biology. So since these two are comparable, it can find out the result. So if I want to get the result, it will be biology and maths. Why? B has ASCII letter which is very small when compared to M ASCII letter. So that is why it arranged it in an ascending order. So this is how you are able to sort out your lists also. But suppose you have different kinds of data, that is there nothing but you have a mixture of numbers and strings. It is not supporting your sorting function because only one kind of data should be there. List supports multiple data types, but while doing functions like sorting, maximum and minimum, one kind of data should be there. So this was the entire tutorial on lists. Okay. So after lists, we have another data type called as tuple. So many people call it as tuple, some people call it as tuples, but I prefer to call it tuple. So it is a proper noun, you can call it anyway. Tuples is also fine, tuple is also fine. So what is a tuple? So how is it different from any other data type is pretty simple. So the way to understand tuple is it is exactly similar to your list. So tuple is another data type that is present in my that is in Python programming language. So how different is tuple from your list is it functions exactly similar to your list. So instead of putting your square brackets, you need to put your curved braces. So you can store different kinds of data, that is nothing but string data as well as your number data as well as your Boolean data. Any data can be stored inside your tuple. But the thing to consider here is tuple is called an immutable data type. So what do you mean by an immutable data type, or how immutable data type works is simple. So immutable data type does not allow you to change the values once you have assigned the tuple. So have assigned my tuple, that is 1, 2, string and true. So supposedly I want to change my data of my 0, 1, 2, third index. So third index is a boolean, so I want to change my third index. So if I assign that my third index is nothing but number 123. So if I try to run it, so it is telling that tuple does not support assignment. So once you create a tuple, you cannot change the value of the tuple. So that is why it is called as an immutable data type. So how this can be used is pretty simple. It can be used in lot of cases. For example, some salary data will be created. So if the salary data of all the people are created in tuples, so any other user or any user who tries to change the salaries, that is for like if for manipulation or for faking, if they try to change some data, it cannot be changed. So similarly, marks can be stored in tuples so that the data is not changed by any other person. So it doesn't allow changing of the data type. So that is how tuple is formed. So similarly, everything works the same. For example, if you want to access the element, so if I want to access the element, I will use tuple of 0. So you can access the index of the element. So you can access the index of the element tuples of 0. Okay, 1 second. So tuple of 0 will fetch me the data that is 1. So that is also possible here. So I can access the range of indices by using colon. So I can use that particular thing. So this is possible. But the thing is, you cannot change the value of any of the element of the tuple. So that is very important while accessing tuples. So you can access the values of tuples, but you cannot change the values of tuples. So that is very important. For example, if you want to delete the tuple of 0, that is my first index. So can I delete it? Obviously not. So you cannot delete it because any data when you create it in a tuple, it cannot be changed. So same thing, anything that is possible with your list is possible with your tuples. So you can create a new tuple called as tuple 1. So that can take in tuple 1 plus another tuple. So you can create new tuples. That is not a problem. So you can create any new tuples. You can add it to a new tuple. So that is possible. So but the major thing is you cannot alter anything. So once you alter any values, that is not possible. But you can create new tuples with old tuples, so that is possible. So I had my old tuple 1, 2 and string true, but I am adding a new tuple that is 1, 2, 4, 5. You can create new tuples, but you cannot add anything to a existing tuple. So once this 1, 2 string true is defined. You cannot add new elements also. You cannot delete the existing elements also. That is how your particular thing is happening. So you can use this function called as, for example, if I have a tuple of just numbers, so 1, 2, 3 and 4. So same thing, that is, you can use the same functions, that is nothing but your max functions. So where you can find the maximum value, where you can use the max function to find out the maximum value in your tuple. Okay, so tuple 1 is not defined. Okay, you need to change the index value here. Okay, max of tuple 4. So this is also possible. Minimum is possible. So that is also possible with the help of tuple. So, but the main thing that you need to understand is, you cannot change the value to anything. So what you can, what other operations you can do is, you can create a list called as list1. So what you can do is 1, 2, 3 and 4. I will create a list, but you can convert this into a tuple. So what I will do is, I'll create a tuple, calling as tup. So it will convert my list into a tuple and store. So that is also possible. So you can convert any other data to tuple. So that is also possible. So if I want to print my tuple, so it is nothing but a list, but it is converted into a tuple. So data storage, everything is same, how to access data. But the only thing is, you cannot change the data because it is an immutable data type. But list is a mutable data type where you can change the data. So similarly, how you create strings, that is nothing but using strings like Python. So I have Python here. So I can convert this particular string to tuple of s, so which will convert my string to a tuple containing individual characters. So that is also possible in case of a tuple. So, but only thing is, data cannot be changed in tuple. So rest all operations remains the same. So you can convert any data. So only possibility is pretty simple. You can, if you have a tuple called as 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to change the value, either you can create a new tuple, or what you can do is, you can create a list. So list1 is equal to list of tup. So then it will become a list. So if I want to change my nothing but my element, that is first element to 5, so I will change it to 5. Then again I will create another tuple, or I can I can create another tuple which is nothing but tuple of my data, that is list1. So this is also possible, or directly you can directly if you want, you can do the different things. So that is also possible. So one thing is converting a list into a tuple into a list, then converting back into a tuple, you can change the data elements again store it as a tuple. So that is possible here. But instead of that, you can create a new tuple itself. So that is much easier. So this was the data type with tuple. So a tuple is exactly similar to your list. It can store different data elements, but the only thing is, the data is immutable here, where the data cannot be changed when you create a tuple. So that is very important. So whenever you create a tuple, you cannot change the data. So that is one thing. So then we have our last data type, that is called as dictionary. So what is a dictionary, or how a dictionary works is, it is pretty simple. So see, the major thing is, why dictionary came into existence, we'll try to learn about it. So suppose I have a list called list1. So that has 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so this, the 1, 2, 3 and 4, this is my list1. I have a tuple called as tup, so that also has data, that is 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if I want to access my first element of list, so what I should do, I should use list1 of 0 to access my first element. So tuple also similarly, tup of 0. So the problem arises here that only if I know the indices of the elements, I can access my data. So if I don't know which index my data is lying in, I cannot access my data. So this was the major problem that we found in tuples and lists. So how this particular thing was solved is with the help of dictionary. So how to initialize a dictionary is, you can initialize a dictionary with the help of curly brackets. So for list it was square brackets, for that is nothing but your for your tuple you have curly braces, but for your dictionary you have your curly braces. So you need to use your curly braces to use your initialize your dictionary. But what is the speciality about dictionary is, in dictionary the values are stored in key value pairs. So what is key and what is value? So in the earlier case, you had your index, that was your key, and the value as it is. So if you are stored 1 in index 0, so your value is 1 and your index would be 0. But here instead of index we have nothing but a key and a value pair. So how to initialize a key value pair is, first you need to mention the key. So the key can be anything. So key can be integer, key can be string, key can be a list, key can be a tuple. So key can be any data type. So after key you need to mention the pair. So this is one key value pair. So next I will have another key, that is 12. So I will have a value that is nothing but pair. So that is the data. I can have a list of data also. For example, I can have a list of data that is nothing but 1, 2, 3 and 4. That also can have a value that is nothing but a boolean true. So basically you need to understand that any data can be a key and any data can be a value. But to initialize or to access the data you need keys. So without keys you cannot access the data. So that is how this is different from your tuple or your list. So if I want to access the data that is 1, 2, 3, 4, I need to use dict1 of nothing but my key. So key is nothing but my string key, which is the like the key for the value that is 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I want to print that value, okay, one thing is you cannot use list here, you can use any basic data type. So you can use your basic data types like numbers for strings, or that is also possible. So you cannot use the other data types. So yeah, so if I want to access 1, 2, 3, 4, so if I want to access 1, 2, 3, 4, I need to use my keys, that is nothing but key. So if I want to access my boolean value, that is nothing but true, so I need to use my key called str. So that is there. So anything can be key or value. So except the fact that list cannot be your key, as well as your tuple cannot be a key. So your list can be a value. For example, you can use a list for a value. So if you want to use a list as a value, so that is possible. But your list cannot be a key. Your key can be basic data types like, see, your list can be value, or tuple can be value, so that is possible. But your list cannot be your key. Why it cannot be a key? Because there are multiple indices that are involved in case of a list. So if you want to call a list, you will have indices inside the list also. That is why it doesn't allow you to take in the value of the keys. But your list can be your data, that is nothing but your value pair. So this is how you are initializing your key and value pair. So that is how you initialize. So if you want to add a new key value pair, so for example, I have already created this. So if I want to add a new one, so what will I do? I will add a new one. So how will I add a new one? That is nothing but dict1 of, I will use a new key. So what is my key? That is key 1 is my new key. So that value will store what? I will store 100 in that particular thing. So if I try to print out that is nothing but your dict1. So what will happen? So this key 1 also got added to my dictionary. To add anything, you can directly use the new key and new value pair. So you can call in the dictionary name. So that is how it is going to add a new element to your dictionary. But the major problem is you cannot have your two keys with the same name. So what happens is you cannot have two keys with the same name. So key is like single. So you cannot change the values of key. So key is single. So for one key you have one value. So you cannot have multiple keys of the same value. You need to have different keys. But if you want to change the data, it is simple. You can use the key function to change the data of the value. So if I want to change the data of my value, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 to 100, so I can use the same key. That is nothing but my like value key, so I can change it. So if I want to change the value of pair also, I can use the key 12. So this is my key for my value pair. So if I want to change the data to pair, again this got changed into 100. So that is how you can change the data between that is nothing but it can change the data of any values by using the keys. So if you want to add new keys, you can directly put in new keys here to get your values updated also. So here new keys and value pair will be updated. So there are two simple functions or two or three functions which you can use here. So one thing is dict1.items. So what dict1.items is nothing but a function or a ready-made function that is there. So what this dict1.item does is it will get you all the key value pairs that is present in the dictionary. So it will convert it into tuples and it will store the key and value pairs in separate tuple. So each key and each value pair is stored as a separate tuple, and it is nothing but stored as a list. So dictionary.items function, what it does is it stores each and every key value pair in tuples as a list. So it is a list of tuples containing key and value pairs. So that is what your dictionary of items doing. So items is nothing but it is converting each and every key value pair as a tuple. So all these tuples it is storing in a list. So that is what your dictionary.items is doing. So you have another functions called as dictionary.values. So what is values? So it will fetch you all the values. So what are all the values that are there? 1, 2, 3, 4 pair and a tuple called 1, 2, 3. So this is dictionary.value fetches all the values that are present in the dictionary. So if you want keys, so similarly if you want to see all the keys in the dictionary, you can use dictionary.keys. That is nothing but it will try to print out all the keys that are there in the particular dictionary. So if you want to print it out, so it is printing out key, 12 and str, which are all the keys in that particular dictionary. So that is the total like the basic functions that are available in a key value pair. So this is a simple example of a dictionary. So basically you need to understand that in Python there are 5 basic types. One is a number, string, list, tuple and dictionary. So dictionary key value pair, tuple it is immutable, same as list, but list is mutable where you can change the data in the list. So but dictionary also, when you can change the values, you can change the values of the particular data. So but you can't change the key directly. You can, by using the key you can change the value. That is how dictionary is working. So after doing that, we have last part that is left out about functions. So what is a function and why do we need functions is pretty simple to understand. So function is nothing but a set of code which is defined and which can be considered as a separate part of code which can be used to rerun the program again and again. So you have a set of code that should be rerun and recalled at different parts of the program. So if you convert them or if you write it in the form of functions, so it is doing a particular task and it can be recalled again and again in different parts of the program. So it is preventing you to recall, like reuse the code again and again and again. So that is how it is stopping. So for example, I have a function. So what I will do is I will initialize my variables, that is nothing but x is equal to 1, x is equal to y is equal to 3 and z is equal to a string. So what happens is, instead of like printing each and every time print x, print y and print z, so what I will do is I can define a function which prints value. So I can define a function. So how to define a function is pretty simple. You need to use the keyword called as def and you need to type in the function name. So I will write the function name. So to initialize a function, you need to use this opening and closing of your small braces, so which will be considered. So inside this you can put any other parameter. So this parameter is like an input parameter to the function. So this values will be used inside the function to do any calculation or to do any process. So if I want to print x here, so that is what it is printing. So this functionality of this function 1 is to take in any value and print that particular value. So that is what it is doing. So my function is defined by using the keyword called def, and again function 1 is the name of the function and you need to mention a parameter. If you are not using parameter, empty, open and close the braces, then you need to use this colon. So if you don't use this colon, it won't be considered as a function. And again indentation. So if you don't leave indent, it will not be considered this function at all. So the function is empty now. So if I use my indent, so then it is considered as the part of my function. So this is with my function that is nothing but function 1. So if I want to use this data to print value, so what I will do is I will use my function 1. So instead of, see, whenever a function is defined, it should be called. So without calling it, the function is empty. So it is not being called. So what I am reducing is, instead of printing each and every value, so print x, print y, print z, I can use this function 1. So if I pass this x, it will print x. So if I can use this function 1 again, so if I want to pass my y, I can pass y, so it will print my y. Then the similar thing, I can print my z also. Now what should happen? It should print x and y. So it printed 1 and 4. So that is the beauty of function. So if you want to do any repeated task, you don't need to write that part of the code again and again. You can use functions. So functions can have any number of statements. So you can have hundreds of statements within this function. So you can have if statements, else statements. So any program that you want to write, you need to write it within this function. You can call this function. So what function calling does is, it will initiate the function for a particular value. So what value we initiated now? With value x, that is nothing but 1, 4 and str. So if you want to print str, you can use this z. So this is called a parameter of the function. So what is the parameter? It is nothing but, it is the input of the function. So whenever the function needs to take in any input, so it is taking in with the help of this parameter. So this parameter will be storing the value of the like the variable which it wants to use. Supposedly I want to use two parameters, so that is also possible. So now I need to pass my two values, for example x, y and z and x. So then it will print both of my data, that is nothing but it will print 1 and 4, str and 1. So any number of parameters I can keep while initializing the function, and any data that I can that I need to, any data type can be passed as an input to the function. So this is called a parameter of the function, or any input parameters of the function, or we call it as an argument of the function. So this can have any lines. You can do mathematical calculations also. So another example I would like to show is pretty simple. So what I will do is, x is equal to, okay, I will initialize my x value. So x is equal to input. Okay, I will convert it into an integer. Input of nothing but my input of enter a number. So I want to calculate the square of my number. So I will enter my number now. So after entering my number, what is happening is, I can use my any data type, that is number. So what it will do is, it can return a data also. So what I will do is, I will return number into number. So what it is returning is, it is returning the square of that particular number. So what is returned in a function is pretty simple. So this returning, what it is doing is, it is returning number into number. So this returned data can be used by other variables also. So what I will do is pretty simple. So I have taken this x as the number which is taken as the input. So it is returning number into number. So if I want to use it, so I will use it as z is equal to function 1 of a data that I need to give x. So if I print z, what it will print? It will print number. It will see this function, what it is doing, basic task, it is returning two numbers. That is nothing but your that is returning a number, that is nothing but a number into number. It is nothing but a square of that particular number it is returning. So this returned value should be stored somewhere. So that is why I am using a variable to store that returned value of this function 1. My function 1 is doing nothing but returning number into number. So if you are getting confused, what I can do is, I can initialize another variable that is called as z. I can use number star number is equal to z. So then I can return z. So anything is same. So this will also work in the same way. So if I give any number, so it will return the number square of that particular number. So what I am doing right now is pretty simple. So I am taking a number as an input. So whatever number I return, right? So that square of that particular number is initialized with the help of a function. So what this function is doing, it is calculating the square of that number and returning it. So when you return any particular data, what happens is that data can be used by any other variable. So that variable you can utilize it to print it or do any other function. But note that one function can return only one data. You cannot return multiple things. If I want to calculate my square root, I cannot return another data also. Only one data I can return using my function. So what is returned after doing any particular calculation or a series of steps inside my